Welcome to Excel 7 video tutorial. What you're going to do is you're going to open up your Excel Spreadsheet 7 Excel file and you're going to see sales for the first quarter of 2017. Okay, so column A will have salespeople, column B will have region, east, west, north, south. Column C will have account numbers, and column D will have order amounts, how much sales were generated, and column E will have the first 3 months, January, February, and March, the first quarter of the year. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this table and turn it into a pivot table. Why use these? Well, because you're using a lot of data, and sometimes it's hard to analyze. You know, this is a lot of numbers here that we're looking at, and there's multiple sales that happen in the same month. So if we want to look at a particular time, like a month, or you want to look at a particular salesperson, etc., pivot tables really do help make your worksheets just more manageable. They're great for summarizing and great for manipulating the data that you want to see. Now, the thing with pivot tables, it does vary depending on what version of Excel, and in the class, everybody has all these different versions of Excel. So most of them are pretty similar, but there's a little bit of variance. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that you view the first video. It's a 4-minute video on basic pivot tables. And this one focuses on our actual file. So what we're going to do is depending on what version, you can either click on one cell of the table or the entire table. I'm going to go ahead and do the entire table, and make sure that you also select your column headings. And depending on what version, on some of the Excel, you would go to tables, and under the summarize portion, select pivot table. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to go under data and go to pivot table. So where it's under the analysis portion, it's just it might be on a different couple of different sections, but it's either going to be under tables and under the analyze, or under data under analysis. You're going to select pivot table. It should usually be, by default, it keeps popping up with information already for me, so I'm going to just check this off real quick so you can see what it would look like. It should look like this, so empty, perfectly fine, because we're going to add information on here. So what we're going to do is the field names, if you made sure you selected the column headings, they should show up on the field name. So what happens is you can see here on this pivot table builder, which is under pivot table here on the ribbons, it's under view. So at any time you can always click on this and come back to this. But you'll see you can just click on any cell and this will pop up. So you have 4 quadrants: report filter, column labels, values, and row labels. So what happens is you can either select items and it'll automatically go under one, or you can just click and drag. So click and drag, it's a little bit easier because it'll just go automatically where you want it to go. So our first exercise, so you can get an idea of how this is going to work, is that you're going to be selecting salespeople under the row labels. We want the rows to have salespeople's names. So I'm going to click on salespeople. I'm just going to click and drag under row labels, and there they are. Then the order amount, I'm going to click on order amount and drag it under values. Okay, I'm going to drag it under values, and it'll show the totals right here. And I'm going to expand, obviously, the column, and I'm going to go ahead, and while I'm here, just to make it a little bit easier, and see, as soon as I click on it, the pivot table builder will pop up. Okay, so don't get scared there, that's automatic. So I'm going to go ahead and do cell borders because I need to see the cell borders. It just makes it much easier. I'm going to add a thick border on the outside, although probably should do that at the end. And I'm going to go ahead and make this money because that's what this is. So I'm going to format it so it's easier so I can see what I'm looking at. Okay. And again, you can make the columns a little bit wider because it's a little bit narrow by default. So I can see now the total of sales per person, and I can see the actual grand total. Okay, so I can see that right off the bat without having to add special filters and do all this kind of stuff. Now, one thing I do want to let you know, it does not, unlike linking, it doesn't update automatically. So for example, look at Kathy Albertson, and it's 2650 is her total, right? So look at that number, 2650. So I'm going to go to my original table and see where it says 925. I'm going to make it an even 900. I'm going to remove 25. okay, if I go to my table 2650. It doesn't update. So then you're like, great, I have to manually do it. No. What you can do is you can select your entire table, right click, refresh data. Okay. Now when you do that, the column will get a little more narrow, but 2625. If I go back and fix this again and put it back to 925, okay, 925, and I go to my pivot table, it still says 2625. I'm going to go ahead and select the entire table, right click, refresh data, 2650. Okay, so you don't have to manually input the number, but you can manually refresh and it'll do that for you. Now on certain versions of Excel, you would go under under Analyze and then Refresh Data. So you can go under Analyze and Refresh or right click and Refresh Data. Okay. So once you have this, you can see again the total for each person. But what about the total amount for each month? What if I wanted to see the total amount for each month? Okay. So what I could do is I can take out salespeople and just add a month. So I'm going to click on month and drag it down. And now I can see the total per month. Okay, the total per month, January, February. Now, as soon as you keep changing this, that's the only thing. The formatting does change, so you can format at the very end. If you're staring at it for a long time, I like to put the cell borders, but it will take it off and you'll reformat it at the very end when you're done. So you can see these are the totals per month. If I want to look at, let's say, the region. Let's say I wanted to look at the region so I can see the division, what contributed to these totals. I can see per region. I can go ahead and click on region and select it under the column labels. And now I can see east, north, south, west, and then the grand total. So the totals don't change. They're the same, but now it breaks it down per region. Okay. And in terms of manipulating the data, you can add filters, which is great. So let's say you might have some people quitting on you and you don't want to include their totals on here. That's not a problem. What you can do is you can click on salesperson, and I'm going to click it down to report filter, let's say. You're going to click on the drop down arrow. Now right now it says select all. Now depending on what version of Excel, and again I'm on a Mac, but you have to deselect, select all, and select multiple selection. On this version, you can just automatically deselect and it'll say multiple items. So we're going to deselect Melissa Post and Chris Walters. Let's say they both quit. Okay, so select those two. As you can see, the numbers changed because now their numbers aren't being added to the totals. See that? See how it says multiple items? Again, for certain versions, you'll have to select multiple items here. It'll be like down here on the menu. If it doesn't have it, it'll just do it automatically. And if you made a mistake and they didn't quit and they're still, or they didn't get fired and you put them on there, their totals come back. See? So you can manipulate data very easily, very quickly, which is what we want. So we want to keep monthly totals by region. So that'll be your first table right here. And since we're not going to do anything else with this, now we can go ahead and add the borders and do the center aligning that you have to do, that you all know you have to do. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to do another pivot table. So you're going to go to your, and again, you do have to move this over because you want your original worksheet on the front. I'm going to move this over. I'm going to go back to my original worksheet and I'm going to select create another pivot table. So I'm going to select my entire table, data, pivot table. And this time what I want is the monthly under column labels. I want the month. Okay. I want the sum order here, and I want, instead of region, take that out, and I want salespeople. Okay. So I want to see how much each person did per month. Okay. So that'll break it down because I'll be able to make a chart from that. Okay. So that's what I want. So again, under column labels, month, under values, sum of order, and under row labels, salesperson. So again, just click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. And what we're going to do is, this is perfect. This is how I want it. So I can go ahead and add the borders. But what we're going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is formatted for currency. So make sure everything's formatted for currency, everything's center lined. Okay. And everything is, yeah, center aligned. Yes, very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a chart from this, and I notice it pushes it in front of my original table. I'm going to move this on over. Okay. I'm going to move this over to, it'll be my third worksheet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select rows 4 through 12. I want all the salespeople and the column headings that has the months. January, February, March. I do not want the grand totals. Do not select grand totals. Okay. So depending on the version of Excel, on Mac you don't have a pivot chart option. And certain versions of Excel have it, certain don't. So if yours doesn't, you're just going to insert a chart. If yours has it, you would select pivot chart. But if it doesn't have it, don't worry. You're going to select the data. Nonetheless, you're going to go under insert, chart, and we're going to do a clustered 2D column chart. Now, if there is an option for a pivot chart, it would be on your ribbon menu. So it'd be here, and you would just select pivot chart. It's still going to look pretty much the same. It just would have slightly different functions, but it's going to look the same. So we're going to do cluster 2D column chart. And if you have pivot chart as a selection, do that. And we do want that first format, so you can do the chart title. And you're going to name all your worksheets in chart title based on your module. So follow your instructions. And make sure that you format currency so it has dollars on the left-hand side. You have on the horizontal axis, you have all the salespeople. And on the right-hand side are the data entry series labels. It's going to be January, February, March, the 3 months. So you're going to rename this monthly sales. Okay, so you're going to, name your chart. Same thing if you have a pivot chart. And you're just going to, once you're done, same thing, you're going to right-click, move chart, save it in its own new worksheet. Okay, new sheet, and it's monthly sales. Click OK, and now it's on its own worksheet. Okay, so you will have, and move that over, and that should be the fourth one. So you should have your original worksheet. You should have your first pivot table, which is basically looking at sales for the first quarter per region. Then you're going to have a monthly breakdown of sales for the first quarter, and then you're just going to have a chart telling you that very quickly visually you can see what months, if you look at Michael, it's like, wow, Michael did great in January, and then he just kind of slacked off. February, March, he just kind of slowed down, I guess. So you can visually see which months each one did better or worse. Okay, so thank you for listening.